Thank you, Francesco. There is a full interview with Reuters News and Francesco Starace in the on-demand tab above, so do check that out later in the day when you get a chance. Moving on though, our first panel of the day will explore the impact of transition on our built environment and our cities. To moderate the session, I'd like to pass over to Bucky Bird, Group Sustainability Director at Barratt Development. Bucky, over to you.
Thank you, Owen. So I'm really delighted to be here today. I'll just say a bit about myself and my role with Barratt. So Barratt is the UK's largest and most recognisable house builder, having been in business for more than 60 years and built more than 500,000 high quality new homes in that time. Last year, we became the first major house builder in the UK to set science-based carbon reduction targets, as well as broader commitments around net zero homes, biodiversity, and renewable energy. My role is to shape the overall sustainability strategy for Barratt as it delivers that challenging transition, driving innovation, implementing solutions for some of the very real challenges faced by the built environment, many of which we'll be discussing today. The built environment sits on the front line of decarbonisation globally. As we all know, the impacts of our climate breakdown continue to strain our planet's finite natural resources, compounded by changing lifestyles and population growth. With the demand for natural resources set to double by 2060, the role of the built environment is undeniable. The impact of extraction and processing of resources, which can increase waste, emissions, loss of biodiversity, land degradation, water pollution. But today is not about problems. Many responsible organizations and businesses are developing the models and tools that can and will enable the use of fewer resources, drive transformational innovation for all, and have been doing so for quite a while. I'm therefore delighted to introduce our expert panel today to help us debate how cities can achieve that transition effectively and how we can all take action to decarbonize the places where we live and work. First, I'd like to welcome Rodolfo Lacey, the Director, Environment Directorate of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. We're also joined by Jan Fromont, the President-elect for T&D Europe, and we have Jorge Barredo with us, who is the Renewables, New Business and Innovation Managing Director for Naturgy Energy Group. To start us off, can I ask each of the panel to take a minute or so to introduce yourselves and your organization, along with an initial view of your activities in relation to the transition to low carbon. If I could come to you, Jorge, first, please.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Jorge Barredo. I'm leading the renewable business in Naturgy, as well as all the innovation and all the new business, including hydrogen and mobility and all what we call new business across all the countries where the company is located. Naturgy is a utility company. We are, our headquarters are in Spain. We have roughly 11 million customers in gas and something like 3 million in electricity only in Spain, and we are located in another, depends gas and electricity, but roughly another 10 countries more or less, and maybe in Latin America, but also in other areas of the globe. So I think that for us, we have 4 focus really in terms of talking about what would be the new cities for the future. I think that one thing that we have to take into account is that the population in Europe mainly is living, 1/3 of this population is living in houses that were built between the 50s and the 70s. So these houses, were built in a period where the economy was completely different, and also with very different materials that today's housing. So I think that the refurbishment of this housing is something that we are doing, and we are taking special care of the population with the lower incomes that sometimes is living in these houses, and this is something we are taking care through our foundation, and we are trying to assist people and in refurbishing the houses and trying to save energy. The other point, I think we will have to talk about mobility. well, we are strong believers in the electricity and also the circular economy. I mean, using these biogases that can be that can be obtained out of the wastes of the cities and and that can be recirculated to the use of the city. I mean, we have 140 points now supplying biogas for mobility across Spain. And another point I think we have to talk is about the generation of electricity. I mean, all this new change of the decentralization of the production of electricity. This is one of our biggest target. Today, the Secretary of Economy of Spain has announced a large package of 1,300 million for self-consumption and also for storage behind the meter. I think this is another point we might talk about. And I mean, I don't want to cover more time, but I mean, we will have time for discussing.
Thank you very much. Very, very useful. And I'll go to Rodolfo next, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am an environmental engineer, but I am the director of the Environment Directorate at the OECD. The OECD, as you know, is an international governmental organization with 38 countries, the most advanced countries in the planet. I would like to say that. Our motto is better policies for better lives. So we have a special focus on policies that really advance our economic development, but trying to reach this sustainable development paradigm that is part of the goals of the planet approved by the United Nations. In our directorate, we covered the whole spectrum of environmental issues, and climate change is perhaps the most relevant now for the situations that we are living. But we have a strong work on biodiversity, on circular economy, and green growth. Topics are also relevant for us, the aspects that are related with pollution. We manage chemicals. Well, we do not manage physical chemicals, but we have systems to share information about the toxics, substances that can affect ecosystems. And we are custodian of many of the relevant economic and financial and fiscal information that are also related with environmental topics. So the perspective that we can provide is also based on science, on very robust data and analysis.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Jan.
Thank you. So Jan Fromont, I'm part of Schneider Electric, but today I'm here as president of T&D Europe. So I will look at CTL through two angles, electrification and decarbonization. So T&D Europe, what we are in fact a specialist of high voltage and medium voltage solution. So it means automation, software, services for a real grid energy transition. Our member facilitates a climate neutral Europe by 2050 or even larger than Europe. Our industry, we represent over 200,000 people manufactured to have a growth size of our industry, and we innovate and supply smart system to efficient transmission and distribution electricity, so around the city and inside the city. Our technology and services future-proof the grid. So we look at the grid, whatever they are, public grid or industrial or private grid, and to make it clean and accessible for all Europeans. So in fact, the innovation and the trend we see is to get a grid more flexible, efficient, and resilient. Or why? Because now the grid needs to integrate more new technology. By new technology, we mean renewable. So it means solar, small one, PV we have on the roof, a large scale one, wind farm, electrical vehicle, electrical bus, storage, whatever. Because a part of the smart city will be to bring all this electrification and renewable inside the city. So it means decarbonization. Rory talked a bit about it already, but it's about transport, energy, of course, but house, building, district, industry. So we need to optimize, in fact, the grid and boost the prosumer. So by prosumer, we talk about the people producing energy with their PV or whatever. So in fact, the appearance of communities or what we call now microgrid prosumer. So it's a collective work to design, let's say, a new electrical grid of the future. And looking at the city, I would like to add that today, with the uncertainty we live, I see a transition of the city. And in the past, we were talking about how to solve the megapoles. Today, what we see in the world is that the people leaving the megapole going to mid-sized city, and the people in mid-sized city going to some villages or even the countryside. So, it means we see the building itself, the office building, changing with co-working. So it means the usage is different. We see the size of the city less, let's say, predictable than before. So certainly the discussion today will be also about what will be the city of the future, a megapole, a mid-sized city, people living in the countryside. I insist on that because I would say bringing the renewable inside the city is certainly easier in mid-sized municipalities than on a large megapoles that are already saturated. So certainly we'll need to look at two different approaches depending on the prediction where the people will live in 2030. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you all very much. So let's dive into some questions, starting with something you've all started already to touch on, which is about the challenges and opportunities facing the built environment in cities. So, if I start with you, Jorge, from your perspective, what are the major challenges and opportunities in this area?
Okay, I think that one of the main challenges for the decarbonization of the cities is that this decarbonization will be equal for the population. I think that we cannot look to a future that will be so expensive that only one part of the cities can move to the decarbonization, while we have other parts, the poorest part, the part that probably lives in the oldest building, that cannot afford this decarbonization and this and being efficient in the consumption of electricity. So I think that we need the governments for making this path to the decarbonization to live in the new cities in a equal way to all the people that lives in the cities, in such a way that the cities becomes a place for the people. I mean, not a place where people just go for working and come back to their residence, and with very empty spaces in the city center. I mean, with very few children. So I think that we need to focus in making this equal. I mean, and equal means to facilitate the digitalization of the city to everybody. I mean, that this probably will make that the services we can provide will be much cheaper. And also the mobility that cannot be only focused in the areas where people is more healthy, but also moving this mobility, the chargers, the cycling, what we think that will be a city that will be a city of the 21st century will have to. I think that one of the biggest challenges is that all the people that is living in the city feel that they are part of this movement, and it is not only something that is trendy and that is for people that is healthy and that is something that they cannot afford. So I think that the governments and the councils have a huge role in this. The companies, we ourselves through the foundation and through the possibility of paying these new services for the people and getting back paid in 10 years. I mean, we need to facilitate that all the citizens feel that this future is that they believe in this future and they are part of this future. So I think that mobility, 5G, but everything has to be focused in bringing all the people together for not making this new future a question only for the richest areas of the cities.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And you raised such a key point. You know, how do we ensure the transition is fair, it's equitable, is accessible to all? And your very interesting perspective is how you can use technology to actually do that and sort of expand that. Rodolfo, would you like to add anything or perhaps expand any of the points?
Oh, yes, indeed. Perhaps we have to remember that our countries are adopting this carbon neutrality concept. And now we have this kind of a collective image of the cities in the future, or by 2050, where all buildings will be net zero or zero carbon ready buildings. Our electromobility devices, trottinettes, bicycles, cars, buses, will give us the opportunity to transport people and goods without the pollution. We are thinking also that many of our cities will balance their emissions with offsets that will come from forests, perhaps, or from different sinks of carbon. And we are envisioning to do this as the cheapest solution, but also in a just transition where people improve their quality of life, but also their jobs, and they will have access to all these new technologies that are related with the digitalization or electrification of almost everything. So that image is in our minds, is a collective image, as I was saying, and we have to build that with the local governments, also with the central or federal governments that are adopting this carbon neutrality paradigm. But it is true that we have to change very, very fast. And we have to implement those technologies that we already know, and we have to deploy technologies that we do not know. It's 50% of the emissions that will be mitigated by those technologies that will be on place in the near future if we invest in them. Let me give you just two examples. Carbon capture and storage. It's only an action that will take place in heavy industries, or is something that cities that are buying electricity from future facilities will provide according with new fiscal arrangements and regulations. How the cities, the city governments will support the decisions that industries, businesses, citizens will do, what will be the framework that they will create to enable the deployment of these new technologies, and how they will facilitate our lives, of course, for the use of these new devices, as we are, for example, using electric trottinettes in many cities. The cities are regulating that kind of devices, but they are doing that because people is demanding this kind of solutions, but also they are thinking that they are doing well in environmental terms if they move in a different way without emitting greenhouse gases or without disturbing the environment with very harmful activities. So I would like to also remember that we adopted a sustainable development goals and we have a 2030 agenda. So there are immediate actions that our governments must do, and the challenge in many of these targets or to implement the measures to reach the targets that was set by the agenda is huge because we are not doing enough efforts, we are not investing enough, and we are not transforming our legal administrative means of implementation for doing that. So that's an appending agenda that we have to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And you touch on something there around the sort of fiscal sort of solutions and how this will come about, which we will come to shortly. Jan, if I could just come to you, and or if I could move the question on a bit. You know, you come from the electric sector, and what's your perception of city health versus the energy sector in the context of this this question that we're talking about?
Yeah, but it's additional to Jorge and Rodolfo. In fact, they're right. There is already technology available, so sometimes it's not at the right cost. So it's still an issue because of industrialization, but let's say a lot of technology are already available, often about software analytics. So I agree, if we look at the recovery plans, the Green Deal, whatever we see a bit everywhere in the world, which are a booster, for me, the issue is more on prioritization, timeline, let's say. Because we cannot make everything at the same time, as explained before. We can dream of a smart city, but we have to do with the install base, with the existing building, with the existing road, with the existing grid. So certainly it's about the 6 domains that we know, that we need to work on smart cities. The 6 domains commonly explain our environment, of course, and we see actually the citizen voting more and more massively in city to have a green party or a greener city. So we see the move at city level. So here maybe I make a parallel. A city is inside the state. So a city is not alone. A city needs to be connected to the state strategy and the state of the grid. So when I look at the grid, we need to make with the legacy. A legacy in France is different than a legacy of electrical grid in California, in New York, or in South Australia, for instance. So we have to merge two, let's say, former strategy or install base that are completely different in a city in France and a similar, let's say, city in California. So that's where certainly in terms of politics, a regional recovery plan like we see in Europe or in US need to match with the state recovery plan and with the city ambition. So it's a 3-party and it's not so easy. Yeah. But after what I see around this environment, we talk about efficiency. Rodolfo say it because people want electricity or energy affordable, whatever it is. So efficiency. We talk about often about decarbonization of building, of transport, and how often it's about digitization. Because before looking at heavy investment, we need to digitize. And why to digitize? But to create what we call, maybe it's a technical word, but digital twin. It means modelization of everything to anticipate, observe, predict, and reduce the cost and react faster. So in my domain, I would say, if I summarize, it's about more and certainly faster, as said before, more efficiency, more electrification with renewable. Of course, that's So my point how to bring renewable inside the city, more digitization, because we need to have software, digital twin, analytics to look, to predict, to estimate, and to advise the city where to invest. Because depending on where will be the electrical bus depot, where will be the new investment of condominiums, etc., but we need to bring the electricity, the green electricity at the right place. That's where software is important to answer to all this uncertainty. As I say, uncertainty where the people will live, uncertainty of the weather, because the weather is impacting the renewables, the wind, the solar, and the way the people will consume. So as a conclusion, more digitization for observability and planification.
Absolutely, and I really like the idea of a digital twin. I'm not so. So thank you very much for that. I think you know, you've all talked quite a lot about collaboration. You've talked about, you know, what happens at a local level. Jan, you mentioned the word prosumer, which is very interesting. I think the next question I'd like to ask you all is, how can we scale up all these existing efforts to meet the sheer scale of the challenge that we have to meet, and what's the role of various parties within that, in particular governments, given we're talking about a global transition. So Rodolfo, if I could come to you first on that, please.
Well, I think that we need money because we already have the technology, and we need regulations. It is true that our green recovery efforts, for example, are only 17%. That's the number we have in our green recovery database. It's only 17% of all the money that is flowing for the recovery purposes. So we are not given the priority to the environmental investments. And we are not aligning, of course, the investments that cities or governments are doing with the long-term vision of carbon neutrality. And we have to do that first. But if we didn't do it when the pandemic was in a very critical point, I mean, if we didn't do it when we really need it, how we can expect in the coming months or years if our priorities are most in the conservative businesses or trying to keep the jobs that we already have. And I think that the cities must think in two words that are very tough for them. Phase out all the infrastructure we don't need for the future and do the retrofits that they need to do in order to reduce the carbon footprint of the cities in general, but for each element of the cities, if each systems in the cities that are providing us services, goods, and the quality of life that we are enjoying. Let's think about, for example, the wastewater systems. We have wastewater treatment plants running with electricity that is coming from fossil fuel power plants. Well, we have to transform those facilities with renewables, or we have to reduce the amount of water that we are throwing away, or we have to adopt a circular economy concept to really be responsible for the waste we are generating. And we can talk in the same way when we address the solid waste situation or the air pollution problems. We are normally avoiding the externalities that our activities are creating for the environment, and we have to do that. At the OECD, we are tracking 3,600 different economic instruments, and we are seeing that, for example, for the green recovery efforts, we are spending more or less $360 billion US, but in fossil fuel subsidies, we are giving to the polluters more than $500 billion US every year, And well, that's not the way to be greener, or that's not the way to solve the problem that we are having right now. So we need to first to balance if we can do it, but we need to reduce those harmful subsidies to the environment. As I was saying, we'll start talking about the phase out infrastructure technologies that we do not need for the future. And we really have to put the money where we need the most in those high emitter devices, elements of cities. No?
Absolutely, thank you. And I think, you know, the question of, you know, where that fiscal support will come from and how that's balanced is definitely one area with many opportunities. You also mentioned the role of retrofit and redesigning, which I find interesting. So from my perspective of my organization, you know, we build new homes and newly constructed buildings or assets are more energy efficient. And I think Jorge mentioned earlier, you know, we know, for example, in the UK that about 80% of the buildings that will be with us in 2050 have already been built and therefore will require retrofitting to become energy efficiency. So there's a real opportunity to align solutions of new buildings versus the solutions of existing homes. So my next question, and I'll come to you, Jorge, is, you know, how much of the solutions are in refitting, redesigning, rebuilding existing elements of the built environment? You know, from your perspective, what would be your observations on that?
I mean, what is the refitting of the housing? I mean, this is clearly an area where we need the help of the government. I mean, of the local governments and the central governments, because the people that is living in houses that were built in the 50s, I mean, sometimes they are very big palace in the middle of the cities, but what is the normal people is living in the surrounding, in the suburbs area of the cities, especially in Spain, where in that time, I mean, between the 50s and the 70s, the country was quite poor, and many developments were built for workers that were coming from the countryside. So these people is living in buildings of 4 floors, 5 floors with no elevators, many of them with a very poor isolation, and I think that for being, if we want to be realistic, we need to provide ways of financing this change to this part of the population, because otherwise these people will be aside of the change of the cities, because this normally is people quite old, or at least in those buildings there are people quite old, and that they cannot afford this change, and it is not in the mentality as well. So if we want to bring them into this change, we need to think about a way of helping them. I mean, and this help that has to come from the government is probably there where it needs to be focused, because I have spoken a lot about the governments, but I wanted to speak also about the private companies, because there are other areas of this digitalization, of the circular economy, of the use of the sewage gases, the landfill gases. I mean, there are other areas that can be approached by private companies, because if for that, what we really need is a stable and reliable laws that we need, that we understand that will be fulfilled, and we can make investment which returns are in 10 years, in 12 years, in 15 years. I mean, if we have this kind of solutions that provide a stable path for investment. So not all the investment has to be done by governments. The private companies can do a lot of investments, and they are ready for doing that. I mean, the thing is that we need to provide a stable balance where we can make these kind of investments. I think that the circular economy is a very important part of this. We need to think about the rubbish that we are producing in the cities need to be treated, need to be evaluated as gas or as any other thing. Not everything can be electrified. Not everything can be electrified. It's very difficult to electrify a truck that is moving 50 tons of rubbish. Very difficult, because I mean, you need you need a lot of power that is not, I mean, it's, if you use electricity only for that with batteries, you probably will have to carry another 50 tons. So not everything can be even inside the cities. Not everything can be electrified. So we need to think about other solutions, stable solutions, where the private companies can invest. And I know for my company, but for other many companies that are happy to invest if we can provide a stable, low, a stable path where we can make decent returns.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Very helpful. And Jan, if I could just come to you, because I'm sure you've got a sort of unique perspective on that as well.
I agree with let's say Jorge and Rodolfo. In fact, it's about, I come back to my point on the prioritization, and I agree. We cannot electrify everything. Electrification brings a lot, but it's a mix and prioritization depending on the equation of the city. So Naturgy is well placed because they manage gas and electricity, and I believe we need to select. For instance, in the UK, they decided the ban of the gas in some building quickly. It's a decision. That's why I say where there's a match between what wants the municipality and what decides the state. And it's I agree with what has been said. It's about collaboration and mitigation. So coming back to collaboration, I agree. It's a collaboration between electricity and gas. If the gas becomes biogas and can feed some topic, it needs to be watched. At the same time, when electricity is easier, etc., but maybe it's a fast combination of decision in heat, cold. All this kind of topic. After, I agree also that public investment are not enough. So we need private investment, and we see industry like Schneider Electric and all the members of TND Europe are a bit the same. We are committed to in Schneider Electric to carbon neutrality by 2025, depending on the scope. So it means the industry, the factory, the product will become circular through a circular economy. It means circular economy, not only recycling, but refurbish, upgrade, remanufacture. So it means a new concept that can be also that's clearly part of the new city we dream today. So it's about a full collaboration. And let's say it's important to define the ecosystem around the city. As I say, in France, it's different in Australia than in US, in Germany. So what is the ecosystem? And by ecosystem, for instance, a simple example, a city close to the sea coast, there is an harbor. You cannot decarbonize the city in Marseille, in Barcelona, in New York if you don't decarbonize the harbor. So what is the story about the harbor? Shore connection, electrifying everything in the harbor, bringing certainly wind farm. So you see that it's not only looking at the city itself, but the ecosystem. And in the ecosystem, in my example, for instance, there is a harbor.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's such a useful way to look at it as an ecosystem. And as you summarize, we've been talking so far about sort of mitigation and how collaboration is such a key enabler of that, whether that's governments, private, the individual consumer. Now, I think, if we move on the discussion on a bit, every day there are examples of the vulnerability of many economies to climate change, to the effects of climate change. And there are many developing countries that are facing the most serious of these impacts. So I would like to ask the next question around adaptation. And we've had a question from the audience as well, asking about ensuring better resilience in cities who are at risk from climate change. So Rodolfo, if I could come to you with this question, please. What are the key points that the audience should be noting on this? And what are the actions that cities and others within that network of collaboration will need to scale up with regards to climate adaptation?
Well, thank you for the question, because I think that the first climate right that we have as citizens of the planet is the right to know if our life is at risk because of the extreme weather event. So early warning systems is an action that is included in the Paris Agreement, and we are expecting to have those early warning systems implemented on place in all the cities of the planet that are vulnerable to these extreme weather events. And we can have it here, by the way, in our iPhones, because we have to know if we're going to die in 15 minutes because of a hurricane, or we can die because of a heat wave or a landslide or a flood. This is for real. And first we have to address that specific commitments from our countries, and as citizens of specific urban areas, we have to demand to our governments early warning systems. The other thing that is important is to increase the resilience of the infrastructure. Think in the examples that we have, very dramatic examples. New Orleans after Katrina, or during the Katrina event. The population couldn't run away from the hurricane because there was only one highway, and the highway was blocked with cars. So redundancy in the strategic infrastructure is key to defend our lives in the cities that are coastal cities, or in the cities that could be affected by floods. Hospital, if you remember, all hospitals have the emergency rooms in the down floor, no, or in the first or in the 0 floor. And when you have a flood, what is the first room that is impacted? The emergency room. And you need those emergency rooms to provide the service that the people will need, because they are affected by the flood, or they are affected by a hurricane or whatever. So the redundancy in also in the shelters is important. Redundancy in the hospitals, in the highways, in the electrification of the cities during these events is quite important to increase the resilience of our cities and reduce the vulnerability of our cities. But this is also about technology transfer, capacity building, and investments that we have to do in our cities with the best available technology, because this is about life. There are many sectors that are transitioning from the regular activities to more resilient activities. The agricultural sector is one of them. We now can see very precise agriculture, no? In fact, they call it like that, precise and protected agriculture. And we can see in our cities that we can produce food at local levels. And that's the new infrastructure that perhaps we need to be more resilient in the future if we are living in arid or semi-arid areas. Well, I live
No, thank you very much. A sort of, timely reminder of the serious effects of what we're all talking about today, but also some really practical, pragmatic ways. And I think something that designers and infrastructure innovators will have to start to consider on an everyday basis going forward, as we're all part of this sort of transition. I'm mindful of time, and I really would like an opportunity to talk about technology and advancement and innovation, which you touched on in your description of the solutions there. So we've, I would like to explore a bit more about that. And I think I'll come first to you, Jorge. And my question is, in your view, what technologies therefore hold potential to turn the dial on the emissions in cities? And what's new and what's interesting in this space? For example, what are the things that can make a real impact? You've already touched on some of those earlier, but if there's anything you would like to expand on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the electrification for sure is one of the key factors that will have to change the way of living in the cities and the consumption of energy that the cities will have in the future. So I think that the decentralization of the production of energy, this concept of the prosumer, I mean the consumer that is also someone that is producing energy, this is something that is key. I mean, it is according to the path that the Spanish government has, is one of the key elements. It is already nearly 1/4 of the electricity that is produced in Australia or in many other countries. In US, for example, that has been also developed a lot, and I think that this is something that will change a lot in Europe in the coming years. I mean, maybe for the way of living that we have, especially in Spain, well, we don't have that many small houses split in the countryside. Where we have more cities is a little bit more challenging, but I mean, we have a big path to growth in the B2C. I mean, in the big production areas, and I think that this is a change we will see. I mean, as I said before, I mean, the government had today announced in Spain 1,320 million euros for providing help to these kind of installations, and this will produce probably the installation of around 3 gigawatts of self-consumption. So it's an enormous change. I mean, 3 gigawatts compared with the objective of the country, that is to install 50 gigawatts in until 2030. So it's a big portion of it, and I think that this is the way. My other concern is about this kind of helps if they stop the economy or they improve it, because it has to do a lot about how it is deployed. I mean, if everybody is waiting for having this subsidy, then maybe this stop the industry instead of pushing it. But I think that this probably would be driven in the good way. So I think that this is one of the key things. The other thing is for the mobility. I mean, we will change the way of I will say, not only to change from fuel cars to electrical cars, but also to change the way we move in the city. I mean, much less private cars, much less entrance to the city center with cars. This is happening in all the cities in Europe, and this will get taking a bigger and bigger portion of the mobility. So this, together with the circular economy, about the wage, I think this probably will be the 3 legs that probably the path we should follow, and all of that could be integrated through the integration of the 5G, or all the digitalization, where it will be a reality where you will be able to sell your electricity, or sell the electricity that is produced by your car, or I mean, this kind of in circular economy in the electricity and in the use of these waste gases. This is something that will change the way we live in the cities.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now we're almost at the end of our session today. In fact, I think we are at the end of our session today. I hope, like me, everyone has enjoyed the conversation, a really rich, engaging conversation. Many thanks indeed to the panelists for their very useful insights. Thank you very much. So that's it. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Likewise, thank you. And thank you as well, Bucky, for your moderation. And to all of our panelists, again, as you say, a really engaging and quite wide-ranging discussion as well. So thank you. A quick reminder to everyone watching to sign up for